So in this lecture, first we will recall what we have done till now, and then we will do some applications of Lagrange's theorem. So let us recall what we have done. Coset need not be a subgroup. An element A belongs to its coset. G can be written as a union of left cosets, or G can be written as union of right cosets also. So either you use left or right, both the same thing. A belongs to H if and only if its coset will be equal to H, and this is same thing as if you use right coset. Both are same thing. Now AH intersection BH is not equal to phi if and only if AH is equal to BH, and logically these statements are same. So negation of this is AH is not equal to BH if and only if negation of this is AH intersection BH is equal to phi. So both are logically equivalent, and what does actually it means is that suppose this is a group and this is your one coset. Suppose this is your coset AH. Then another coset BH will not look like this, because there is something common in the AH and BH. So this means if common, then they are equal. So this is not the case. There will not be any intersection between AH and BH. So if this is AH, then BH will be totally disjoint, or both will be same. So this is what we mean by this. Now next thing is that there is a bijection between H and AH. So the cardinality of H and the cardinality of AH are same. So if H is a finite, then in case of H is finite, then the order of H is same as order of HA, and that is also same as order of AH. This we have proved. There is a bijection between this and this. So number of left coset and number of right coset, in between these two sets there is a bijection, so cardinality of both the sets are same. So suppose this is finite, this is a finite set, then it means the order of this set is equal to the order of this set. The order of both the sets will be equal, because we have proved that there is a bijection between them. Even if it is not finite, even then there is a bijection. This special number, if it is a finite, then it is a special number, and that number is actually called the index of the subgroup. So let me define it and then we will proceed. So index of subgroup. Index of subgroup. Suppose G is a group and H is its subgroup. We say index of H in G is infinite if the set of left cosets of H in G is not finite. If this set is not finite, so if this set is not finite, then this set is also not finite. So we say index of H in G is infinite if this will happen. So we say index of H in G is this number or this number if this set is finite. This set is finite. If this set is finite, then this number is called the index of H in G. So as we have seen in examples that this group is infinite I take a subgroup nz, this is also infinite. But if you see the set of left cosets, then the set of left cosets are n in number and they are nz, 1 plus nz up to n minus 1 plus nz. So both the groups are infinite, even then this number is finite. So this number is n. So we can say that the index of nz in Z is n. We usually denote index by, we denote index of h in G by, different books uses different notations. So some books write it like this, some books write it like this, some books also write it like this. So any one of this is index. So some more books may have some more notations, but these are the usual notations used for index of h in G. So under this notation we can write Z and Z is equal to n. Similarly, if I talk about what is the index of Z in Q, Q is the set of rational numbers. So this index is infinite. So as we have seen in previous lecture, the number of cosets of Z in Q are infinite in numbers. So this index is infinite. This index is finite. Now if the group is finite, then the number of elements in the group is finite. So number of cosets will always be finite. So in a finite group, index is always finite number, and that is equal to the number of left cosets or the number of right cosets in G. So suppose the group is finite. So let me write here. Suppose G is a finite group and H is its subgroup. H is the subgroup of G. Then what will happen is that the index of H in G will be the number of left cosets of H in G, which is the same thing as the number of right cosets of H in G. And now by the Lagrange's theorem we know that the order of G is equal to the number of left cosets of H in G and into the order of H. So while proving the Lagrange's theorem we have got this identity. We write n for it, the number of left cosets. So it means if you want to determine the number of left cosets or the index of H in G, then it will be simply order of G upon order of H. So in case of finite group, this will be order of G upon order of H, but in case of infinite group you cannot write it like this. For example, in this case if I want to write this order of Z upon nz is equal to order of Z upon order of nz, then this is not a valid formula because this is infinite, this is infinite, and this is infinite upon infinite form. So you cannot write it like this. So this formula is valid only for finite groups. If you have a finite group, then you can determine the index by this formula. Okay. So it may happen that a subgroup is infinite, group is infinite, even then the index of the subgroup in the group is finite number, for example Z upon nz, and it may also happen in case of Q and Z, you have seen that the index is infinite. Okay. Now come to the next observation. This observation is the Lagrange's theorem. In Lagrange's theorem, what we have seen is that if the order of the group is finite, then the order of subgroups will divide order of a subgroup will divide the order of the group G. This is called Lagrange's theorem. Now we are coming to the applications of this Lagrange's theorem. So let us do some applications. So let me have some more observations. So let me come to the observation number 9. Suppose G is a group. Suppose G is a finite group. Suppose G is a finite group. And X is an element in the group G. So if X is an element in the group G, then take H to be a subgroup generated by X. Because G is a finite group and H is a subgroup of this group G, so of course H will also be a finite subgroup of the group G. Now what is the order of H? We know from the lectures of cyclic groups that the order of this will be the order of X, will be equal to the order of X. Now by Lagrange's theorem, what will happen is that order of H divides order of G, but order of H is equal to order of X. So order of X, this implies order of X divides order of G. So this means in a finite group, order of elements divides order of element divide the order of group. So if group is of order suppose 8, it cannot have an element of order 7. If the group is of order 9, it cannot have an element of order 4. So this is a very easy application of Lagrange's theorem. For example, again let us see. Suppose I have a group of order 12. So what are the divisors of 12? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 and 12. So this group may have an element of order 1, may have an element of order 2, 3, 4, 6, 12. But this group may not have an element of order 5, 7, 8, 9, 11. So this group may have elements of this order, this group may not have elements of the remaining order. Now it does not confirm that this group has one element of order 2, one element of order 3, one element of order 4, one element of order 6 and 12. It does not confirm. For example, suppose I take a group S3. If you remember the elements of S3, this S3 has one element of order 1. S3 has one element of order 2, exactly 3 elements of order 2. This S3 has 2 elements of order 3, but this S3 does not have any elements of order 6. So it is not confirmed that all the orders will be present in this group, but it is confirmed that if there is some element, its order will be either this, this, this or this. So let us write this observation here. In a finite group, order of an element divides the order of group. So now come to the next observation. Let us think of a situation where the order of the group is a prime number. Suppose G is a group. So now this is observation number 10. Suppose order of a group G is P, where P is a prime number, where P is prime. Prime number. So take an element X in G, and suppose this element is different from identity. This is not identity. Then by this result, the order of this element will divide P, because P is the order of G. Now for any prime there are only two divisors, 1 and P. And in a group G there is only one element of order 1, that is E. So it means order of X has to be P, because order of X has two possibility, 1 or P, because P has only two divisors. 1 is not possible because 1 is the only element, order 1 is only the order of identity element. So order of X is P. So order of X is P, it means the subgroup generated by X have order P. So it means the subgroup generated by X has P elements, and G also has P element, and this is a subset of G, so it has to be equal to G. So this means G is cyclic. G is cyclic. So what is the conclusion? Conclusion is that prime order group is cyclic. So the conclusion is prime order group is cyclic. Let me write the conclusion here. So this is observation number 10. Prime order group is cyclic. So take any prime number, suppose I take 5. So any group of order 5 will be a cyclic group. Any group of order 7 will be a cyclic group. Any group of order 11 will be a cyclic group, and so on. So any group of order 2, any group of order 3, any group of 7, or any prime number if you take, the group of that order will always be a cyclic group. Now come to the next observation. This is observation number 10. Let me come to the observation number 11. Observation number 11. So take any number m in n. Consider um. Some books also write it as so don't be confused, both are same thing. Now take an element a bar in um. Now you recall that we have done that order of is phi m. Now from this observation, order of this element a bar will divide order of because the order of element divides the order of the group. So it means order of a bar divides phi m. So it simply means that phi m is some k times order of a bar. So it means where k is some integer, in fact positive integer. Now this means that a to the power phi m, so a is a bar to the power phi m is equal to a bar to the power order of a bar into k, and order of this can be written as order of a bar into k, and this is identity, so the whole thing will become identity. So it means a bar to the power phi m is equal to identity. And what is identity of the identity of is 1 bar. So let me write 1 bar here. So this is 1 bar. Okay. This equation is in UM. This everything is in UM. And bar means modulo M. So we can also write it as a to the power phi m is congruent to 1 mod m. But the a which we have chosen has a property that, because a bar is an element of um, so this a has a property that a and m has GCD1 by the definition of um. So it means if you take any a which has this property, then a bar will be inside um, and that a will satisfy this equation. So let me write it again. So take a in Z such that the GCD of a and m is 1. Then clearly, then a bar will be in um. A bar will be in um, and as soon as a bar will be in um, this whole thing will be satisfied. So it means we can write a to the power phi m is congruent to 1 mod m. So this is our observation number 11. So let me write it here. Observation number 11 for a in Z such that so am is equal to 1 where m is some natural number. Then a to the power phi m is congruent to 1 mod m. This result is called Euler-Fermat theorem. Some books also call it Euler theorem. So this is interesting result of number theory, and this is a group theoretic proof of this number theoretic result. Now in this, suppose this m is a prime number. Suppose m is prime. M is equal to p prime. Suppose in this equation we put m is equal to p, where p is a prime number. Then what will happen is that this phi m, that is phi p, will become a to the power p minus 1, because phi of a prime number is p minus 1. This is congruent to 1 mod p. This is also a result that if you have a prime number p and a is any integer, then a to the power p minus 1 is congruent to 1 mod p. If you multiply a on both the sides, then it can also be written as a to the power p is congruent to a mod p. And this result is called Fermat's theorem, or some people is also call it Fermat's little theorem. Fermat's little theorem. So let me write it also. Fermat's little theorem. So this is Euler-Fermat theorem, or Euler's theorem, some people call it. If you take in place of m prime p, both the statements are equivalent. So any one of this you may call as Fermat's theorem or Fermat's little theorem. Now suppose, let me come to one example. Suppose I take a number 3 to the power 45 and I am asking you, if I divide this number by 23, then what will be the remainder? So situation is, I have a number 3 to the power 45 and I want to divide it by 23 and I want remainder. So remainder is nothing but modulo. So remainder means modulo. So you have to determine 3 to the power 45 bar mod 23. This you have to determine. This simply means that you have to determine 3 bar to the power 45 mod 23. But as you can see by this result, we know that 23 is a prime number. So this 3 to the power 23 is actually 3 mod 23. So you can write it as 3 to the power, so 3 to the power 45 bar is 3 to the power 23 plus 22, and 3 to the power 22 is 3 again. So this is 3 to the power 22. So let me write it properly, 3 to the power 22, and 3 to the power 23 is 3 again. So this is again 3 to the power 3 into 3 to the power 22. So this is 3 to the power 23. So it is 3. So it means this is mod 23. So when you will divide 3 to the power 45 by 23, the remainder will be 3. So this is a small application. Now come to the another result. So come to the next observation, observation number 12. Observation number 12. Suppose G is a group and P is a prime. Such that order of G is equal to P to the power K, where K is some natural number. So the order of the group is P to the power K. Then by the Lagrange's theorem and its application, we have seen that order of any element of G is a divisor of this number is P to the power L, where L is varying from 0 to K. So it means order of each of its element, order of each element is actually A is power of prime. Order of each of its element is a power of prime. So such a group is called P group. So let me define it properly. P group So P group So let me define P group first, and then I will, okay, let me define first. So what is a P group? So a group is called P group is called P group if order of each of its elements elements is a power of p. So order of each of its element is a power of p. So what we have seen in this observation is that, let me write it here again, if order of G is p to the power n, then G is a p group. G is a p group. P group means order of each of its elements will be a power of p, and this is just easy consequence of Lagrange's theorem. Okay.